It's my pleasure to have up here on stage with me Michael Timmeny, class of 1973, member of the Foundation Board. His bio is in your program. He is the Senior Vice President and Chief Government Strategy Officer for Cisco. Initially, we thought that Michael would come up and give some remarks on the podium. Then we thought about doing fireside chat here. But maybe instead you'll sing, I'll take off my shirt and put on a vest, and we'll do act 2 of the show. No, let's stick with this. Okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be very hard.
We'll stick with this. Okay.
It'd be very hard to follow what Neil put on and Rita's act. Now I'm more intimidated than I had planned to be. So anyway.
So we're just going to chat for a few minutes here, so let me start, Michael, with we'd like to hear your story. How do you go from a student walking around Binghamton to now being, at this role at Cisco where you're interacting with lawmakers and world leaders, on behalf of a major corporation? What is your story and how you got there?
Well, my story at Binghamton, first of all, I started as a transfer student, and I came in my sophomore year, and I was in Hinman College, which I loved, and during the course of my time at Binghamton, I lived on campus. I became an RA, and I graduated without a real plan. I had always been involved in politics and engaged in politics, but unlike many of my classmates who had planned to go to law school, some to go to medical school, some to go to business school or graduate school, I had no plan. So I graduated, and I came back I grew up in Hastings-on-Hudson, about 20 miles from here. And my father helped me get a job after school. I came here. I didn't like that. I was living at home. Living at home after going to Binghamton was not really a lot of fun, especially in 1973, as you can imagine. So I actually went back to Binghamton, and I became the dorm director of Smith Hall. And so...
We have Smith Hall in the house?
Smith Hall was I have to say, it was a lot of fun. But it wasn't really, I didn't think that was going to be my career enhancing. So one day I packed up my then 65 Ford station wagon and made my way to Washington. I figured Washington was the place for someone like me to be. And I roamed the halls of Congress for 2 weeks. I found 12 openings, had 8 offers, and one of them was with the Honorable Shirley Chisholm, who was the first African-American woman in Congress. And it has never been lost on me that my start in life, in my career, was given to me by an African-American woman. And so, from whom I learned an enormous amount. One of the reasons I got that job, interestingly, was that I had been an RA and a dorm director. And the job was involved, it was what's called military casework, and I was giving counsel to young people in the military. And they figured, oh, well, I had been an RA and a dorm director, I could give good counsel. I don't really know that was necessarily true, but it got me the job. The other thing that helped to get me the job is the pedigree of Harper College. When I was in the office, they looked at my resume, they said, oh, Harper College, this guy must be smart. And so sure enough, it worked out. And over time, I worked for many other members of the New York congressional delegation, including Congressman Ted Weiss, who represented this very building. I also worked for then Congressman, now Senator Chuck Schumer, as his first chief of staff, and even in those days, I was talking to Harvey about this. Chuck Schumer would come this close to missing a vote, but he would never come this close to missing graduation. And so he still comes to Binghamton graduations, Harvey tells me, with like an hour's notice, and that's the Chuck that we all know and love. So
yes, and for those of you who have never seen it, look on YouTube, John Oliver, Chuck Schumer,
yes.
Graduation speech.
So basically, after 22 years in working in Congress, I decided I had tuition to pay, and I had obligations for my kids, and I went into the tech industry, and it was the same sort of thing. I sort of started at a mid-level And then I've been at Cisco now. I'm now in my 22nd year at Cisco, and sort of I've worked my way up the chain of command, and now I report to the CEO as an officer of the company.
So this may be my biggest softball question of the night. Has Washington changed much since the 1970s?
I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but the truth is, I'll tell you a story about Mrs. Chisholm. So I was 22, 23 years old, working for, as I said, the first African-American woman in Congress. Imagine what that must have been like the day that Shirley Chisholm walked into the Hall of Congress as the first African-American woman. And she was an incredibly successful legislator. And so I would ask her, I would do fun things for her, like I certainly wrote for her, but I would do things like get her lunch. And people think, I used to think, this is like, what am I doing? I'm getting Mrs. Chisholm's lunch. But what it afforded me was the opportunity to sit with her. And I would often have lunch with her. And so I once said to her, as only a 23-year-old can ask a political icon, I said, so Mrs. Chisholm, so how does this work? How are you so successful in getting legislation passed basically for the children of New York? That was her real focus. Education and the children of New York was her real focus. And she said to me this. She said, Michael, look at me. She said, here's the story. I've got 3 disadvantages, 3 things going against me. I'm black, I'm a woman, and I'm from Brooklyn. And so, which now we know is an enormous advantage to be from Brooklyn. Everyone wants to be from Brooklyn, right? So she said, so what I tried to do is I tried to find a nice white man, preferably from the South, and if he can be a Republican, even better. And I'll stand with him for the things that he wants, and he will stand with me for the things that I want. Therefore, the winners are the children of New York City and the children of America. And so that is how it used to work. In these days, unfortunately, our politics are much more tribal. When we are in the ring, we always are going to our corners of the ring. We are often never coming to the center. And that's really a part of the challenge that we have. And so if I may, I'll just do a commercial. So one of the things that I have done in terms of my engagement is to create a scholarship for young Binghamton people to be involved in politics and public service. Because my feeling is this: when I was 9 years old and putting John F. Kennedy bumper stickers on cars in Hastings-on-Hudson, when I was 13 years old and saw Robert Kennedy 27 times when he was running for the Senate in New York here, I had people to look up to admire. My concern now is that we need our young people to be engaged, to be involved, and frankly, we also don't want them to be from the wealthiest families. We want them to be from the kinds of families that everybody in this room came from, many of whom are first in their family to go to college. And so I established this scholarship for that specific purpose.
That's great. And we have Binghamton, we have a congressman from Binghamton,
Yes.
and we have others working at different levels of government, right? So
No, it's an incredible thing. I mean, when
Yeah.
you think, and we were discussing backstage, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries is the 4th ranking member of Congress right now, and it would not be surprised if he becomes the Speaker of the House.
Incredible.
Which is an incredible thing, and as we know, he's been engaged with Binghamton, and that's a great thing.
Excellent. Well, let me ask you a little about back in Binghamton.
Sure.
You've gotten re-engaged in a great way with the university. You were disengaged for a while. some memories of Binghamton now that you go back to the university and you see the campus, and I'm sure it's a little bit different than 1973.
It's a little bit different. So Harvey, I don't want you to listen to this part, and I hope there's no press in the room. But when I went to Binghamton, as I said, I came as a transfer, basically in the fall of 1970, I guess it was. And so think about it. So that's a year after Woodstock, which was less than 100 miles away. It was the first semester that colleges opened after the Kent State massacre that occurred in Ohio, where 4 students were killed by National Guard in a protest against the bombing of Cambodia. So it was sort of like a little bit of a tense time, right? Doris Kearns Goodwin has written that great book about Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt called No Ordinary Time. Well, it turns out there are several parts of our lives that are no ordinary time, so we have to give credit to Doris for that title. But so when I arrived in Binghamton with my Republican father, here I was, a nice boy from Westchester. I even had a blue blazer on. I arrive at Hughes Hall, and we put our stuff in my room at the end of the hall, and I can remember this very, very vividly. I can describe the furniture, and I can describe the wall, what was on the walls, and things like that. So we put our things away, and I said, "Okay, Dad, well let's go take a look at the campus." And again, this is the first 45 minutes I'm there. And so I walk out in the dorm lounge, and those of you who lived in Hinman, you'll remember this. There were like suites, like a dorm lounge, and then suites. So I noticed off in the corner of the dorm lounge these 3 guys, like they had like little cocktail tables. These 3 guys like kneeling and like leaning over the cocktail tables with some sort of device that looked like something like this, right? And they're doing something like this, and I'm thinking, oh my God, here I am. I'm like censoring the car radio.
Were they studying really closely?
They were studying really closely, and when Casey Jones comes on, the song Casey Jones comes on, and I don't want my father to hear it, so I turn the radio off, right? And so I said, okay, I have 1 second to fix this, or I am never going to be allowed to stay here for the final 3 years. So I said to my father, I said, oh, Dad, look, over there, there's like construction. Let's go see out the window. Let's go see. So I whisked my father by, and I was like so relieved. And so he left without ever seeing that, and frankly, I never told him the story. So that was so I have been back since.
Yep.
And what I find, frankly, is I've been fortunate to be able to speak to classes, incredibly diverse, engaged, really impressive groups of students. I have mentored some of them. They are smart enough. When someone comes to speak to your class and if they're smart enough to ask you to be a mentor, take it, because these are young people that we really need to help, and it's been a great thing for me and very satisfying for me.
Well, that's great. So with our last 30 seconds before we move on to the next portion of the program, we have a very, very engaged audience, very connected to Binghamton. But what would you tell them about the value of being connected and the value of being engaged with the university?
Well, I think here's the thing. I mean, in my case, as you said, I sort of came back to Binghamton. And I came back to Binghamton for a couple of reasons. My own children went to schools where asking for help was the name of the game. I joked with Harvey that my son went to Georgetown for graduate school, and every single brick on the Georgetown campus is like named for somebody. You can't find a tree is named. Every step, this speaker would be named for somebody, right? Giving back is like a thing.
Crew team, tennis team.
Everything. Okay. Yeah, that aside from that. But also my company, Cisco, believes in giving back, that it's critical, that we are very fortunate. We have great positions. We have means. We should be giving back. But finally, I will say this, that I attribute my engagement to Harvey and Harvey's outreach, and also Tom Galby, who's back there at table 16. Tom Galby, I'll tell you this. So I'm Cisco's chief lobbyist, right? I'm the chief. Tom Galby would make a great lobbyist. He's like a great salesman. He can talk you into anything. So he talked me into this. And the reason that I was susceptible to it is this, that there are some people in our society who believe that they alone can do things. The fact of the matter is, and the truth of life, is that nobody does anything alone. We all get to where we are because people have helped us. So my feeling is, when we get to a point that we are able to help, we should do it. And frankly, we should be very happy that we are at the point that we are able to help people.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very, very much.
Okay? Thank you.